So for a while now, I've been wanting to make one of these wooden tri-squares, and after looking up different plans and things online, I sort of sketched out what I wanted here on the dry erase board. Now, one of the main things that I needed for this project was some quarter saw material for the tongue, and luckily I had some of this old gym flooring. I believe it's beech, and I'm going to be using cherry for the handle. So I had to remove the varnish that was on the old gym flooring, and I'm just using my old beater block plane for this. I didn't want to send any of this wood through any of my machines with this varnish on it, and this seemed to work pretty well. Before taking the material over to the jointer and the planer to flatten everything out, I'm using the bandsaw here to cut off the tongue and the groove off of this old flooring and to sort of get it at least decently flat before I get started milling it up. I jointed one face and one edge of both boards before taking the beech over to the table saw to rip it down. Now, one thing I had to do here was, because I didn't have enough width for the tongue, I actually had to cross cut the quarter sawn beech in half and then glue both pieces together on edge so that I could then run it back to the table saw and get the right amount of width that I was going to need for the tongue. Anytime I'm gluing two boards together like this, I like to smear glue on both surfaces. I'm really not too concerned about applying too much glue. I'm much more concerned about not having enough and the board not being strong. It's easy enough once you get it glued together and clamped in place to just go back with a damp rag and sort of clean up the excess glue squeeze out so you don't have a lot to clean, obviously, after it's dried. Over at the planer, I'm milling all the parts down to their final thickness. I believe the handle is 3/4 of an inch and the tongue is somewhere around 1/4 of an inch. At least that's what most of the plans I read had called for. Now, obviously after that, I ripped all the parts down and cross cut them to their final length. You can probably tell by the amount of parts here that I'm making two of them. I figured if I made one, I would probably end up wanting another one, so I just tried to batch a couple of these out at the same time. I routed a chamfer on all four sides of the body at the router table and cut a chamfer on the end of the handle where the tongue would actually slide into. And when it come time to cut the chamfer on the tongue, I used not only a backer piece, but I also sort of crept up on the cut to try to prevent as much blowout as possible. I had to cut a mortise into the end of both handles to be able to accept the tongues, and for this I'm using my shop-made tenon jig. Now, this is sort of a trial and everything as far as getting it to fit, and I was doing my best to try to sneak up on the cut, even using some practice pieces or other scrap pieces to test the fit, and I still somehow managed to get the fit a little bit more loose than I wanted it to be, but I guess in the end it'll probably be alright once it's all glued and clamped. I think the mistake I made here was that the test piece I was using to test the fit was slightly thicker than both handles were, so whenever I thought I had it fitting good and I went and cut the two handles, it was actually a little more sloppy. I wanted to cut the scallop into the tongue before gluing it into the handle itself because it's a lot easier to do it at this point than after it's all glued up. So I made the marks where I wanted it to be, drew the half circle, and then took it over to the bandsaw to cut it out. Now I currently have a 3/4 inch blade in the bandsaw, so I had to make a series of relief cuts so that I could sort of make the circle without, messing it up. And I tried to shape it the best I could with the end of the blade before taking it over to my oscillating sander and smoothing the cut out. The one big regret that I had while gluing these pieces up was that I should have had some sort of jig or right angle fixture to hold both of these pieces at 90 degrees while the glue dried while they were clamped up. I checked both of them with a square as I was gluing them up, but for somehow they obviously moved on me while drying and didn't come out to be as accurate as I wanted them to be. Instead of using some sort of rivets or something to hold the tongue in place to the handle, I'm actually going to use brass. I've never used brass before, and so I wanted to try it out. I believe this is 3/16 of an inch brass, so I just obviously drilled 3/16 holes and rough cut each piece of brass with a hacksaw, and then glued them in place with some epoxy. I'm just using the stick that I stirred the epoxy up with to dab a little bit in each hole, and then driving the brass pins in with just a little small finishing hammer that I have. For the ends of the brass that was sticking out, it was fairly easy just to take a file and file each of the nubs down flush with the wood. It really didn't take that long to do and was really a little easier than I thought it would be. And once that was done, I was able just to hit it with a little bit of sandpaper to sort of smooth each one of them up. The sanding was pretty straightforward on these parts. I just started off with 80, 120, and finished with 220. For the finish, I opted for tongue oil. I wanted something that would be easily replaced or easily renewed if it needed to be, and I really like the look of it as well. I really think that the sapwood in the cherry looks great. It's a nice contrast to the heartwood, and over time as the cherry darkens, I really think it's going to look great. Now these definitely didn't turn out perfect and didn't really turn out as accurate as I wanted them to be, but overall I'm really happy with it, and I learned quite a bit from making these that hopefully I can apply to making not only another one of these if I make one in the future, but other projects. So I guess all in all, it's not too bad. So part of the reason why I made two of these is because one of them is being given away. Sean Stone over at Stone & Sons Workshop is having a 10K giveaway on his website, and one of these is going to be my contribution for what is given away. So if you'd like a chance to win one of these, you go over to his website and sign up for his giveaway. And if you're not already following us on all the social media sites, be sure to do so. There are links to everything in the description below. That's it for this time. Happy trails. Thanks for watching.